Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if you'll please rise, we'll say the pledge together. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Ms. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the regular minutes of September 21st.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Regola-Dye. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any corrections? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, both in person and online. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Cedar for visiting all of our schools today when it was the first day back to begin our second 9 weeks. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. And Mr. Thompson, what would you like to share?
Probably the best thing I can do here tonight is say very little, because I know I can tell that the teachers, the administrators have had a day. And so, but we so appreciate everything that y'all have done. And, there's just when you think you have one thing figured out, something else gets thrown at you. And so, you have to call on your faith in times like these and just know that you're going to get through this. And that's all I have to say, is that this is such a challenging time for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Workman.
Well, again, I'll keep it brief, but thanks again to the teachers and the staff. I'm sure it literally felt like the first day of school, and with that came challenges, I'm sure, but I hope that everything went well and will continue to go well. Again, thank you to Mr. Cedar for visiting the schools, making sure everything was running properly, and again, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Mr. Regola-Dye.
Thank you all for being here and at home. Thank you doesn't seem enough to the community, to our staff, to all the people who have worked so hard and continue to work so hard for the safety and well-being of our children and our teachers. This has been the most challenging thing I think our schools have ever faced. And we've come over to a side now that we have hope. And so thank you to all of you for your prayers and your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Getzmann.
Again, welcome to everyone, and thank you for coming and for watching online. I'm certain that today was a very a big day filled with angst as we all got back together for the first time and welcomed some new students and returning students. So thank you to our teachers and staff, and also thank you to our bus drivers who made sure the kids were there safe today in not the best of weather conditions. So thank you to them as well. So I'm looking forward to a full return and lots of healthy days.
Thank you. Mr. Cedar.
Well, I too would like to welcome everybody. I'll share some additional information in the superintendent's update, give you a little bit of a flavor of a little bit of the day and just some other information that I think is very pertinent. So we'll save that for that superintendent's portion of the agenda.
Hey, thank you. And I think we have a student government representative. If you'd like to come up and introduce yourself and share whatever you have.
Hi, my name is Hunter Schisler. I am the senior class secretary at the high school. And so I'm just gonna dive right in. So first off, I'm gonna talk about like adjusting to the green schedule and the start of the second quarter. So today was the start of the green schedule, just like everyone knows, and the start of the second quarter for students. It was really nice to be able to see everyone, and everyone was excited to be able to see all of their friends in the different cohorts. And the students who packed lunch could go down to the gym and eat. So it was more spread out. So that was a nice opportunity. And kids are still following mandates and rules such as wearing masks, social distancing as much as possible, washing their hands, sanitizing their hands when they exit and enter a classroom. So that's really nice. For student government, we have a meeting this Wednesday, and we'll be talking about prom ideas because we have to try and be flexible with that. And we are talking about a spirit week that we're having next week for our last home football game. So we're excited to have that with all the students present. Some of the clubs have started to meet. NHS is having their second meeting this Thursday, and we're talking about some service opportunities such as a blood drive, which is October 28th from 12 to 5 p.m. in the Memorial Theater. So if anyone would like to come and donate, that would be very much appreciated. And Food for the Hungry. So this year, Food for the Hungry, we're thinking about it's going to be the week before Thanksgiving break. And kids can just bring in money and non-perishable foods to the high school, and we'll tally that up, and it'll be a nice service opportunity and help the community. Q Club has begun to meet as well. Today was their first in-person meeting. They've been having all their meetings on Zoom. And they have started some service projects such as planting yellow tulips for mental health awareness around the high school. They did some storm cleanup when we had a big storm ran through in September, I believe. And they helped paint the East Elementary School playground, which I heard that went really well and it looks really nice now. And then MVTV released an episode today about it talked about the rules during the green learning model and what sporting events have been happening. And sports, band, and orchestra, winter sports are beginning to prepare for their sporting seasons with the help of the new field house, which is very, very nice. It's very state of the art. And that's swimming, basketball, and wrestling. My sister is actually out of swim conditioning right now. And then the varsity football team is 3-4 after winning this past Friday against Delaware Hayes for 20-14, which was a really hard fought game, but I'm really proud of the team. And the golf and cross country teams have their senior night this Friday. And the band, football, and cheerleading senior nights are next Friday during the football game. And the orchestra had their first concert this past week, and it was live streamed on Facebook, and it went super, super well. And there are 3 tournament games this week. Tuesday is a volleyball game at Canal Winchester, and boys soccer is at Reynoldsburg. And then Wednesday is a girls soccer game home against Westerville South. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is Darcy? Darcy here?
See
Okay,
here.
and Mike Lang is. Okay, and there wasn't any public participation? I don't. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move ahead then to no board items. So you have an addition to.
I do have an addition to the agenda for tonight. It's under classified staff substitute employment. You'll see N. Swanson there, so it is in the classified section. That's an addition to your agenda tonight.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent's report.
All right, well, as I said, I'd share with you a little bit of the superintendent report. I decided to do it in the form of a Google slide, of course. And so hopefully folks can see that there. Let me go ahead and go to full screen. So it was an interesting day, to say the least. It felt like the first day, and I was reminded as I went out and about to visit all the buildings that, do you realize this is the first day in 7 months that we've had all students back in school? And it's incredible when you really think about it. March 13th was our last day to have all students together. So today felt really kind of unique. It really did feel like a first day. As Mrs. Getzman had mentioned, I was out at the high school, middle school at about 7:20, kind of watching the traffic flow. And needless to say, it was dark, it was raining, and we had more people on campus than we're used to having. And so the lines were a little longer. And so patience will be the key here as we kind of get back into a new routine. It was the same at some of the elementaries. I know here at Twin Oak in the afternoon, when parents came to pick students up, the lines were a little longer. So all that to say, it did feel like a first day. And that's a good thing. The kids were all excited. I really saw teachers who were excited to see their kids. They were all wearing face masks. It just seemed like we were starting to get back to a little bit of normal. So what I thought I'd do is just share with you some updates here. So these are the couple things I want to touch on. The second 9-week learning model, some safety reminders, our COVID-19 dashboard, some small changes in our Mount Vernon Digital Academy, school lunches, parent-teacher conferences, and school bus safety. So kind of came across this little cute template here. So second 9-week learning model, again, this is just a reminder. Today was our first day to go back to our traditional learning model. We decided to go green a couple of weeks ago. So today was our first day where we brought students back to school 5 days per week. So we're excited to be in that green model. I still think that the hybrid model was a good way to start the school year. Now we'll be able to, to hopefully get back into some things. One of the questions I get quite frequently is, well, things are getting a bit more challenging. We're hearing on the news that things are getting more difficult. So what would be things that might happen that might change our green learning model? And so we really wanted to address this. I addressed it in a parent update as well as a staff update. And here's some of the answers over here to the right. Knox alert level, that would be one of those things that we'll take a look at. And so you'll notice that the state has a system, and that state system puts an alert level out depending upon a lot of data and statistics. Well, we've adapted this to our liking, and you'll notice that level 1 and level 2, yellow or orange, will remain in the current learning model that we're in. So today we're in green. We would stay in green if it was a level 1 or level 2 alert. A level 3 alert or red alert, and lots of counties are going into a level 3 alert. We will prompt a meeting with Knox Public Health to really look at the data. And we're not only going to just look at Knox County data, we're going to look at student data, district data, and we're not going to automatically drop into some mode if we go to level red. And I think you're seeing that fairly consistently across the state. You've got over half the state in red right now, and you've got lots of schools that are still in session. And so there are things to consider. So we decided not to just immediately go to something in level red. If we would get to a level 4, and there's not been a county in Ohio yet to go to a level 4 purple, if we did go to a level 4, we would go to a remote red learning model. In other words, we would go home and we would learn from home. All right. So those are things that are really important. The second thing we would look at over here on the right is if there was a state order. I mean, if the governor came down after a period of time and said through Ohio Department of Health that schools need to go remote for a couple of weeks, we obviously would follow the governor's lead as it relates to that. The other two things which are really interesting over here to the right, student data. We would certainly look at student data. I'll show you our COVID dashboard here in a minute. Thankfully, over the course of the first grading period, we had 2 students who had tested positive for COVID, and in a district of just shy of 4,000, that's really a good number. So we would look at student data, we look at students who are in quarantine, and we would have to make a decision based upon that. The other one down here, which I think is probably a bit more specific to us, would be our teacher or our staff data. And if that data would change, where in other words, we had teachers or staff members who tested positive or who were being quarantined, we would have to carefully look at that data as well, because obviously we have to have teachers in the classrooms to be able to teach our youngsters. This is probably the one that scares me the most, quite frankly, is just our teaching staff and our regular staff, be it bus drivers or others. If we found ourselves in a situation where we were being compromised in that way, we could find ourselves dealing with a specific class, maybe a specific building, or perhaps the district as a whole. We have had a number of teachers who are now being told to quarantine, and they're for reasons outside of the school setting, but nonetheless, we have to deal with those, and we have to be very mindful of what those things are. So Knox alert levels, a state order, kind of student data based on absences and quarantine, teacher and staff data based on positive cases or quarantine would be the things that we would look at. If a change in learning conditions is warranted, we would do our best to provide parents with as much lead time as possible based upon the circumstances. Now, obviously, if the governor came in and made a statement that, next Monday, I can't give that 14-day lead time like we had hoped we could. If I get into a situation where I have a number of teachers in a specific building or at a specific grade level that I can't fill, that lead time might be a little bit less, but we want to try to provide parents with that lead time. Again, our hope is to stay green. We'll fight really hard to do that, but we could find conditions that warrant us changing. Okay. Any questions on that before I move on? Because maybe you do and you want to ask relative to that. Go ahead, Mr.
So,
Thompson.
What would constitute then, let's say, a teacher needing to quarantine?
So a teacher could be asked to quarantine for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, it would be they've come in contact with someone closely as defined by the CDC who is a positive case. That could be a spouse, that could be their children. And if they were asked to quarantine because of those reasons, now teachers are considered essential workers. And there comes this next little stepping stone of that. So if a teacher has come into close contact and has been asked to quarantine, and they were symptomatic, then they would stay home and they would not come in and they would stay, until such a time they were cleared. But if a teacher was quarantined and was asymptomatic as an essential worker, they could come into work and continue their work. Now, there are additional requirements for a teacher in that situation. Obviously, we're masked all the time, but a teacher who was under quarantine but working as an essential worker would really isolate themselves within their classroom, probably wouldn't go have lunch with teachers unless they were masked. They would have to be masked the entire time. There's some other cleaning protocols that are important. So there are a small set of different criteria for a teacher who's quarantined but still working. That make sense?
Thank you.
You alluded to the fact that we did have some teachers out on quarantine. How many do we have out currently? Do you know?
We have one teacher that is out based on quarantine as of today.
Okay.
We have two other teachers who have come into close contact with a family member who are still asymptomatic and who are following the asymptomatic protocols of the teacher as an essential worker.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is a look at our COVID dashboard, and this is as of today. All right, and we did some different things with our COVID dashboard. We'd encourage you to take a look. It's on the district website. If you go to this little COVID button, it sits on the right-hand side. When you click into it, you'll see a graph that looks something similar to this. Right now, we have no active students. In other words, no students who are positive cases. We have no staff members who are positive cases as of right now. This doesn't take into account quarantine. These are active cases. If we did have an active student and let's say it was a student at Columbia, you would see a graph that would go up this way. All right. If we had a staff member, all right, you would see the staff member in gray. And if it was a central office staff member, you'd see a 1 or a 2 or how many ever staff or students were impacted in that way. Okay. And so you look at, we got 3,817 students, 541 staff members. We'll continue to monitor it this way when we're informed that we have a positive case. Thankfully, right now, we have no active cases. But the reality is, as the conditions continue to get worse, it probably isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we just have to make sure we know where those cases come in and how it impacts the district as a whole. So I won't make any prediction that we'll stay at 0 forever, because I just don't see that happening. But we want to be able to mitigate it as best we can. Has anybody got a chance to look at the COVID dashboard? Okay. Again, I'd love it to stay just like this. No bars, no bars at all. And we'd be in good shape. But we want to be as transparent as possible. And so the active cases will be listed there. We do have some safety reminders we think that are important. So In the parent update, we have health and safety guidelines. I really would encourage folks to get in and look at those. It talks about all the steps that we need to take as staff members, as students, as parents, to help keep our own selves safe, our children safe. We do have a daily home screening check. We're asking all parents and students in the morning prior to coming to school that they look at this form, and there are 7 items down there, and they have to check those off to see if they're safe to come to school. Things like fever, cough, aches and pains, those kinds of things. And if they find that one of those fits, then we would ask for them to stay at home. But we do really need parent support here in helping us by doing these daily home screening checks. Masks are required for all students and staff, grades K through 12. Because we've now had to shrink a little bit our social distancing, which is the second one there, mask breaks have to be adjusted a little bit. All right. Before, we were able to keep students about 6 feet apart, which is kind of that ideal guidance. We could all take a mask break at the same time for a short period of time. But now that we've shrunk down to 5 feet, 4 feet, and in some cases 3 feet, which is still acceptable, we can't all take mask breaks at the same time. So basically, they might take a classroom of students and split them into 4 and say, group 1, you can take a quick 30-second to a minute mask break. Well, that would mean everybody around them would have their masks on. So it's not everybody at once. It would be more of an intermittent kind of a mask break. Again, I mentioned about social distancing. We'll continue to try to maximize that as best we can. We will have students who are 3 feet apart in certain classrooms, but they will always be masked, and that's what the requirement indicates. This is one that gets overlooked, quite frankly, regular hand washing and sanitizing. Again, everybody that I've talked to, that we've talked to, talks about this being, everybody thinks of it as airborne, but it's really going to be more of, what's the right word I'm trying to think of? Can you think of what I'm thinking? I was thinking spittles more than anything else, but it's a respiratory. There it is. It's a respiratory. So it's coming out when you talk or when you speak. And so it has a tendency to get on your hands, and then the hands go to the face and to the eyes and to the mouth. And that's, quite frankly, the predominant way that it is spread. And so regular hand washing and sanitizing, getting your hands cleaned when you come in, are safety protocols and reminders that we just want to share. Respiratory droplets, that was the case. Yeah. Mount Vernon Digital Academy has changed a little bit. And when I say that, when we made the announcement to go green, back to school 5 days a week, we had 275 students who left the Digital Academy to come back to school in a green mode. 275 students coming back definitely impacted our plans that we had for the first 9 weeks. At the elementary level, we were able to have 2 teachers per grade level and 3 intervention specialists. Our numbers dropped at certain grade levels to where not only could 1 teacher serve that group of students, but because I had so many students come back, I had to take a teacher and put them back in their building. Twin Oak, as an example right here, because a lot of Twin Oak students came back, it decreased that Digital Academy, but it increased the numbers here. So I had to go back to having 3 teachers per grade level. Middle school had a little bit of a different model. And because of the number of students that came back, we ended up taking the middle school and the high school, and we made it really one 6 through 12 Digital Academy. And so we've had to redistribute some folks. We have now a 612 program. It is an Apex online curriculum. We have 8 teachers and an aide now serving the middle school and the high school students. So we did make some adjustments along the way for the Digital Academy. We'll continue to serve those students. Go ahead, Mr. Workman.
Yeah, 275 students that left. Where kind of is the breakdown between those 3 areas?
That's a good question, and I probably would want to double check just to make sure. There was a lot of elementary in that group. Probably more elementary students came back than any of the other 3 categories. But to shoot you an exact number, I probably wouldn't be able to shoot it to you right now.
Thanks.
But I would say the elementary was the area that was the most impacted. probably the high school was the least impacted because I think they knew kind of what they were getting into. They have maybe the greater propensity to be able to learn that way, to be a self-starter and don't have to depend upon others. Okay. Any other questions on the Digital Academy? You know, I would give a big, I know when I had to meet with some of these groups, especially the elementary teachers, you know, we had 16 initially, they put their heart and soul into it. And they were going way above and beyond what you might think of as a digital academy. They were almost treating it like their own classroom just online. They were Zooming regularly. And so the number that had to come back, they came back, but you could tell there was some level of disappointment because they were really, you know, grooving, but we just didn't have the ability to be able to staff. And quite frankly, we've got a couple elementary classrooms right now that are 4th and 5th grade that are in that 24, 25 range. That's getting really high. And so we're really kind of trying to monitor that, and we might have to adjust along the way. This is one I think I really need to highlight, and we're trying to highlight in our buildings. It's school breakfast and lunch program. You know, we received some great, wonderful news recently that breakfast and lunch would be free to all students, grades K through 12. All students, grades K through 12, not through December, but now through the rest of the school year. And so parents, you know, you can send your kids to school and they can get a lunch. It'll be a click. You don't have to put any money in their account. I think it's really a benefit for all of our students and families. As you know, finances are a challenge right now for a lot of folks. This is a wonderful blessing that we had. And I put this little graphic, oh yes, it's free. And so we want to continue to make sure that they understand that. Now, at the middle school and the high school, they can still get some a la carte kind of items. You do have to pay for those, but the traditional lunch is free. And we really want to encourage our kids to take advantage of that.
Breakfast is free as well.
Breakfast is free as well. Also, if you look down here at the very bottom, our Digital Academy students, they can also get free breakfast and lunch. Now, they pick those up every Monday from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock at the high school. So if you've chosen the Digital Academy option, you're going to actually get, you know, a number of bags of items. It certainly is more like a grab and go kind of a thing. But they have access to those same things as well, and they'll get them all on Monday. So really a blessing that we're able to get this from the federal government, and we want our kids to take advantage of it. Any questions on that one? Okay. Getting down here to the end. Parent-teacher conferences are coming up. I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. November 11th and the 12th. We're really, really encouraging our parents to look at attending those via Zoom or a phone call. If you can't do those, we will schedule in-person meetings, and in-person meetings are okay. We really would try to continually emphasize the Zoom or the phone calls as much as possible. If you do schedule an in-person meeting, all participants will need to be masked. And that will really be important as we go into those days. I know the buildings will be sending out some specific information on that in the coming days. All right. Just a quick note, it's School Bus Safety Week. Obviously, I know Mrs. Getzman mentioned our bus drivers. They do a fantastic job. And the theme this year is red lights mean stop. Red lights mean stop. So when the red lights are on, we're crossing and are boarding our students. Failure to stop is not only dangerous, but it's illegal. You need to stop. So please, please, when you see those red lights, stop. That's the encouragement from our school bus safety crew. All right. And that's really kind of it for kind of my board update. Anybody have any questions? I thought I'd just share those items quickly.
Mr. Cedar, I had a question regarding how many are still in the Digital Academy.
We have just shy of 500 who are still in the Digital Academy. We probably were about 800 to start with. So you've seen quite a decrease in those numbers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there some reason other than learning the story for why kids are coming back?
I don't know if I heard that whole question.
Digital
Oh.
Academy?
You know, I think there's a varied reasons for returning from the Digital Academy. I think primarily it's just the time that parents have to kind of be not only a parent, but feel like they've got to be their teacher at home. Structure. If you've ever coached or taught your own children, sometimes they look at you with these wide eyes and you're like, so I think just getting back to the structure of day to day and feeling as though they can help support their children, I think is probably the primary reasons.
If you want to go ahead about board policies and introduce those.
Yes, we have a number of items recommended for your approval in this section. Those are board policies. This is our second reading of those policies, so hopefully you got a chance to work your way through those. And that's the only item in this section for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve the policies as listed.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gulladye. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Getzman. Were there any questions about any? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. For curriculum and the student liaison report, I'm just going to focus on the student achievement in depth. And there's a research article that says, want to learn more effectively, take more breaks, research suggests. And this is a researcher who is a professor emeritus at the University of New South Wales at Sydney. And he is an influential learning science researcher, best known for his cognitive load theory, which suggests that educators should present information without extraneous details. Otherwise, the students' brains can literally overload with what amounts to intellectual clutter. He talks about his latest line of research, and there's even more new insight. The human brain may need regular breaks when learning to help it refresh its working memory capacity. And then he talks about the working memory capacity is really not very large, and it only holds a few items of information. That's all we can deal with at any given time. And I remember hearing that we could memorize 7 numbers at a time and that kind of thing. So taking regular breaks may help to support learning, and the brain's ability to retain information in working memory is limited. And if students are having trouble understanding something, that may translate to their working memory as overwhelmed. And the secret is to match that limited working memory with the vast storage space in long-term memory, which he said has no known limit, thank goodness. So he says working memory can suffer from what he calls resource depletion. In other words, our working memories may get worn out from excessive use. So we need to take lots of breaks. And I think that's especially true for elementary students, and the younger students we know their attention spans are much shorter, and maybe that explains why, because their working memory needs a break. So any questions? I just thought that was interesting.
No questions, that's just a comment. I think a lot of elementary teachers have adhered to that
Already.
philosophy for a long time when it comes to those recess breaks, so.
And they may not have understood the research, but they
They
knew they needed to do that. Right, good point. Okay, we'll go ahead then to curriculum items.
Very good, thank you. I have one item for board approval tonight. It's for an overnight field trip. This was a trip that was scheduled last year. Obviously, because of the end of the year and COVID, it was canceled. So they put this trip on the agenda for, again, this summer. And it is to Discover England with a Paris extension from EF Tours. Mrs. Keaton is leading that tour. I did ask some specific questions about it. They do have what they call a peace of mind guarantee. So 45 days prior to the departure of this particular trip, which is June 11th, if conditions still kind of warrant that it's not safe or that we shouldn't go, students would get their money back.
Are you sure about that? Because when I read the contract, it said they would get a voucher to apply to another trip. And that they had already paid, the students have already paid for this because it was to be last year. So this is being applied to this new trip.
That was the information that was shared with me. I can double check that. If you want to put this one on hold until we make sure, we can do that. A
Well,
voucher is certainly different.
right.
than
That's
getting
what
your
it
money
says.
back.
If you read the Discover England Paris extension, if you read that contract.
Okay.
So what do you think, board members? Well, if I don't have a motion, I guess we will know that we want to. But they've already paid for it, so I think
they would continue to take additional students if the students were to sign up. I think they had somewhere in the neighborhood of, I thought it was like 18 students last year who were going to attend. Now, some of those were seniors. That number is down a little bit. I think they're down to 8 or 9 students at this point in time. And this peace of mind guarantee, I thought was that they would get back their money, and maybe it's and/or a voucher, but if we want to double check that, because I certainly don't want to approve something that would put our students' resources in any jeopardy.
well, I guess it's a moot issue because the parents have already paid for this, except for the new students that might be joining. That would be the only concern.
I'll leave it up to your discretion whether you want to put this one on hold and bring it back in November.
What's your pleasure, board?
I think we better verify.
And it wouldn't make any difference for those who've already paid, but it would for any new people coming on, so.
Those that have paid and that are not going, I mean, that's between them and the trip companies, whether or not they received a voucher or their money back, but hopefully they would have some kind of insurance on the trip.
I don't see why we couldn't wait and bring this back to November and make sure we
Since it's
find
not
out the
until June, that would
information.
be
So
good. Okay. I would feel
I'll-
better knowing for sure.
I'll rescind that item for recommendation.
Okay. Thank you. And we're down to fiscal services.
I would say the financial report is as boilerplate as it gets in terms of what you're used to seeing. So unless the board, I'm sure the board has looked at it, unless you want to specifically talk about something in there, I won't spend any time with that. We do have an appropriation modification.
Do you want me to get out of this?
Yeah. Thanks. You'll see it on the third column over. If I could tell you the color, but I would be guessing, so I won't even try. We had to increase our appropriated amount in that, and that is for a safety grant. So we never know how those are going to kind of come. This year, we happen to get a little over $40,000 in terms of a bus reimbursement. So the grant was provided in order to update and make transportation safer and more efficient. So in a situation like ours, where we typically replace 2 buses every year, it was helpful in paying for part of one of those buses. So we're appropriating, we've already spent the funds, so hopefully as a board, you'll approve this.
That would be bad if we did. Okay.
We have some donations. If the board has no questions, I'll continue with those. We have a donation to the Mount Vernon City Schools from RCI Mechanical and Brian Stafford Plumbing. It was miscellaneous field house and bus garage materials and labor valued at over $29,000. Have a donation to the Mount Vernon City School District from Lowe's. During our boil advisory, they donated 60 cases of bottled water to the district. And then we have some books for our Memorial Book Fund. We had one titled The Memory Tree, donated to the elementary level in memory of Margie Ann Young. Oh, I'm sorry, it was donated to Pleasant Street. She was the mother of Kathleen LeMay, who's a speech therapist at Pleasant Street Elementary and Mount Vernon High School. We had another book titled Prague Winter, a personal story of remembrance and war, and memory, not speaking very well, in memory of Holly Dora Whiteman, sister of Lisa Perry, who is our food service secretary, and that was donated to the high school. We also had another book titled Learn to Paint in Acrylics with 50 Small Paintings in memory of Beverly Jane Umler, who is the sister of Lisa Perry, Food Service Secretary, and that was also to Mount Vernon High School. Now that I think I'm done with that.
I will say, just so, I mean, obviously, these are always sad occasions, but these happened not right simultaneously. So one was last year, and we missed that opportunity for Lisa to have a book dedicated in her name. Obviously, two in any given year is a challenge, but it wasn't back to back.
I'm glad you clarified that because I felt bad thinking she lost two sisters, so close together, so. Okay. Did you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Unless the board has
I would entertain a motion then to approve those 3 items as read.
So moved.
Thank you. Was that Mr. Thompson?
Mhm.
Okay, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Okay, any questions?
I would just like to say thank you to RCI Mechanical and Brian Stafford for all of their work on the field house.
Very worthwhile. Any other questions or comments? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Golodai.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Under business services, our legislative liaison report.
Thank you. Just a very brief report. HB 17 was signed by the governor. It allows an enhanced homestead exemption for surviving spouses of public safety personnel who have been killed in the line of duty. Other information, the State Board of Education voted to approve their fiscal year 2022 to 2023. And then that resolution will go to the Office of Budget and Management. The Department of Education also released additional information regarding the assessment for and development of the reading improvement and monitoring plans. Although the Department of Education can't change the requirements, they can give recommendations and guidance. And I read through some of that, and it's good guidance. And finally, I did contact Columbus offices of Senator Brenner and Representative Carfagna regarding SB 358. 358 is the bill that has language and requirements regarding the Ed Choice program, which affects so many school districts, including our own here in Ohio. That's all I had. If anybody has any questions or comments, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have some items for,
We do have 2 items for board approval in this section. One is for a free facility use request. Vermac is going to be using one of our Fieldhouse community rooms coming up for an organizational meeting during the school day. And we also have an item number 2, a resolution number 33-20 authorizing the sale of property owned by the board, no longer need for school purposes. Now that property is located 920 Harcourt Road. That's the old bus garage. And so you see it pretty vacant out there as you're driving out Harcourt Road. We checked with legal counsel and we'll have to put that up for auction. So this is the first part of that resolution.
thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve those 2 items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Regola-Dye. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Getzman. Were there any questions? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Golodai.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Student services.
I have 2 contracts to bring you tonight. The first one is a contract with Boundless Behavioral Health. This is a company in the Newark area that we have used before to meet the needs of a student. So this is a monthly fee that we need to pay. And the second one is a contract with North Central Ohio Educational Service Center. This is another one of those contracts that we need to engage in with an ESD outside of our own district. And that is for audiology services for a few of our students that have significant hearing impairments. Those 2.
Thank you. Would entertain a motion to approve those 2 items.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Regola-Dye. And do you have any questions you'd like to ask Mrs. Rose? Okay, hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. And now we are down to certificated licensed staff.
Under the section, no items for information, number of items for board approval. It's obviously challenging when you get teachers who retire because they've been such an asset to the district. We got 2 of them this month, Joan Fithian and Denny Thrift, who's right here at Twin Oak. Both of them are looking to retire at the end of the school year. So hopefully we get a chance to celebrate with them as the year goes on, but 2, boy, just incredibly valuable teachers to the district. So those 2 retirements, we have a number of resignations for various things that you see there. The employment of substitute teachers, we continue to really look for substitutes during this COVID timeframe. We do have a middle school study table where we're really trying to help those students in somewhat of an after-school program. Not all those people are being used all at once, but they are used intermittently. And then we have a number of supplemental contracts that are listed in item C. We have some non-teaching staff members in extracurricular contracts, and those items there are listed for you. So, and then finally, volunteers. We have a number of volunteers that will help out through the district. Those 4 items for your approval.
I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gulladye. Do I have a second?
Second. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any questions about any of the items? Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Okay, we have one
We have a
more.
couple items we pulled out of the agenda, a couple extracurricular and a substitute. First is assistant high school cheerleading advisor. And the second is the employment of a sub. So those items for your approval.
Okay, thank you. And I would entertain a motion to approve those 2 items.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gulladye. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann. Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, and we have classified staff.
Under classified staff, no items for information, just a few items for board approval. The employment of 1-year limited contract, a 2-year limited contract bus driver, and then some substitute employment.
Entertain a motion to approve those classified items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gulladye. Do I have a second?
Go ahead, Steve.
So which one?
Steve.
Mr. Thompson.
I'll take this one.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried. Okay, if there is nothing further,
I have no need for executive session unless the board does.
I don't believe so. I haven't heard anything. So.
Okay.
So I would entertain a motion then to adjourn.
So moved.
Since I'm losing my mask, it's about. Okay, we
I'll
have
second.
a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And if you'll call the roll, please.
Mr. Gulladye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes, motion carried, and we are adjourned. And thank you all for attending.